Admiral Quan Tejo stood on the bridge of the starship Eternal Dawn and watched his galaxy die. The main screen showed red zones spreading across the star map like blood in water. Each red dot meant another world lost to the Void Swarm. Each dot meant billions of lives ended. "Sir, we're getting the final transmission from the Centauri colonies," said Communications Officer Lee Dongwu. His voice shook as he spoke. Tejo nodded. He had heard too many final transmissions in the past 3 years. They all sounded the same, screaming, crying. Then silence. The screen filled with static, then cleared to show a burning city. Strange crystal creatures moved through the streets, absorbing everything they touched. Buildings, vehicles, even the ground itself turned into more of the creatures. The camera shook as something crashed nearby. "This is Colony 7, a woman's voice said. "The swarm has reached the city center. We cannot stop them. They're turning everything into themselves. Tell our families we—" The signal cut to black. Tejo closed his eyes. Another world gone. Another few billion people dead. The Void Swarm had appeared 3 years ago from empty space between galaxies. They consumed matter and turned it into more of themselves. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just ate everything. "How many ships do we have left?" Tejo asked. 12, sir," replied his second officer. "Down from over 10,000 at the start of the war. 12 ships. That was all that remained of the great Galactic Confederation fleet." Tejo looked at the tactical display. Red zones covered 90% of known space. The swarm had eaten the core worlds, the outer colonies, even the mining stations on dead asteroids, sir. "Chief Science Officer Park So-jin is requesting an urgent meeting," Dongwu said. "Send her up." A few minutes later, So-jin entered the bridge. She carried a datapad and looked excited, which seemed wrong given their situation. So-jin was a small woman who studied alien life forms. She had been trying to find the swarm's weakness for 3 years. "Admiral, I found something in the old archives," she said. "Something that might help us." Tejo doubted it. They had tried everything. Energy weapons bounced off the swarm. Kinetic weapons just gave them more matter to absorb. Even nuclear fire only made them stronger. "What did you find?" he asked. So-jin activated her datapad. The screen showed a star chart of a small solar system with 8 planets. The third planet was marked with warning symbols. "This is the Sol system," she said. "It's been under quarantine for over 200 years. Tejo frowned. "Why? Because of the dominant species. They call themselves humans. Look at this classification." The screen filled with text marked in red letters. "Extreme biological hazard. Do not engage." Species classification. Apex predator. Contact forbidden by Galactic Council Order 2847. Apex predator? Tejo read the file. His eyes grew wide. "These humans survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years?" "Yes, sir." "And look at this," So-jin scrolled down. "They have fought continuous wars among themselves for their entire recorded history. The report says they consider conflict a natural state of being." Tejo read more. Humans had survived plagues that killed half their population. They had split atoms and used the energy to destroy cities. They had even fought wars in the vacuum of space around their home planet. The survey team that studied them 2 centuries ago was so scared they recommended total quarantine, So-jin continued. They said humans were too dangerous to contact under any circumstances. "But that was 200 years ago," Tejo said. "Surely they've become more civilized." So-jin shook her head. "The last probe sent to observe them was destroyed. Not by accident. The humans detected it and shot it down with a weapon that shouldn't have been able to reach it." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had stopped their work to listen. The idea of contacting a species too dangerous for the Galactic Council seemed insane. "Admiral," So-jin said quietly, "I know this sounds crazy, but look around us. We're dying. The swarm has beaten every weapon we have, every strategy we've tried. Maybe we need something the galaxy has never seen before." Tejo looked at the star map again. Red zones everywhere. Only a few small pockets of blue remained, and the swarm was closing in on those too. In a few months, maybe weeks, everything would be gone. "The Council forbade contact for good reasons," he said. "The Council is dead, sir. Earth Station was consumed last week. We're the last organized force left in the galaxy." Tejo walked to the front of the bridge and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm continued its endless feast. Soon they would find this small fleet and finish their meal. "What if these humans are as dangerous as the reports say?" he asked. What if we bring something worse than the swarm into our galaxy? Sir, Sojin said. With respect, how could anything be worse than total extinction? The Admiral thought about that. She was right. The swarm would consume everything eventually. Maybe these humans would too, but at least that would be a different kind of ending. The Sol system is far from here, he said. In the outer rim near the galactic edge. Yes, sir. But it's not in swarm territory yet. We could reach it? Tejo turned to face his bridge crew. Young faces looked back at him. Most of them had never known peace. They had spent their entire careers running from an enemy they couldn't fight. Dongwu, he said, can you break the quarantine codes? The communications officer looked nervous. Sir, those codes have been sealed for 2 centuries. Breaking them is a capital crime. We're the last government left. I think we can pardon ourselves. Tejo made his decision. Break the codes. Send a message to Earth. What should the message say, sir? Tejo thought for a moment. How do you ask for help from a species too dangerous to contact? How do you explain that your entire civilization was dying? Tell them this, he said. We are the last survivors of the Galactic Confederation. An enemy called the Void Swarm has consumed our galaxy. We cannot stop them. We know humans were quarantined because you are considered dangerous. We are asking you to prove that reputation. Help us. Or watch as the swarm finishes eating our galaxy and looks for new hunting grounds. Dongwu's fingers moved over his controls. Ancient codes fell away one by one. Finally, he looked up. Message sent, sir. Now we wait. Tejo nodded. He had just broken the oldest law in galactic history. He had contacted a species that terrified the Council so much they had hidden it away and tried to forget it existed. Now all he could do was hope he had not just doomed what remained of civilized space. The humans were coming one way or another. Whether they came as saviors or as something worse remained to be seen. The human ship arrived 3 days later. Admiral Tejo had expected something massive and threatening. Instead, the vessel that dropped out of hyperspace was smaller than his flagship. It looked almost peaceful with smooth white hull plating and no visible weapons. Sir, incoming transmission, Lee Dongwu announced. They're speaking our language. On screen. The main display showed a human face. Captain Kim Hyejin looked surprisingly normal. She had dark hair tied back and calm brown eyes. She could have passed for any of a dozen Confederation species. Admiral Tejo, she said with a slight smile. I'm Captain Kim Hyejin of the Earth vessel Resilience. Thank you for your message. We'd like to meet in person to discuss your situation. Tejo blinked. The most dangerous species in the galaxy was being polite. Captain Kim, we appreciate your quick response. Where would you like to meet? There's a neutral station in the Kepler system, about halfway between our positions. We can be there in 6 hours. After the transmission ended, Chief Science Officer Park So-jin shook her head. That wasn't what I expected. Maybe the reports were wrong, Tejo said. Maybe humans aren't as dangerous as the Council thought. 6 hours later, Tejo learned how wrong he was. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room aboard Trading Station Delta 7. Tejo brought So-jin and Dongwu as his advisors. The humans brought 3 representatives. Captain Kim Hyejin still looked calm and diplomatic. The man beside her, introduced as Choi Jae-sung, wore what looked like a military uniform. He was tall and moved like a soldier. The woman on Kim's other side was Nam Yuri, listed as an engineer. She had short black hair and seemed to find everything amusing. Please tell us about this void swarm, Kim said once everyone was seated. So-jin activated a holographic display. Images of the crystal creatures filled the air between them. They appeared 3 years ago from intergalactic space. They consume matter and convert it into more of themselves. We estimate they've destroyed 90% of inhabited worlds. The humans watched without expression as the display showed burning cities and fleeing civilians. Tejo studied their faces, looking for some sign of horror or sympathy. He saw only interest. Fascinating, Yuri said. They're like a biological manufacturing system. They've killed billions of people, Dongwu said sharply. Yuri nodded. Yes, very efficient. What countermeasures have you tried? So-jin ran through their failed attempts. Energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, biological warfare, even attempts at communication. Nothing worked. The swarm just kept growing, may I? Jae-sung reached for the display controls. His movements were precise and economical. Within minutes, he had pulled up tactical data that took Confederation analysts weeks to compile. Interesting formation patterns, he said, highlighting parts of the display. They move like a hive mind. Very organized. No individual initiative, is that significant? Taeho asked. Jae-sung smiled for the first time. It was not a comforting expression. Oh yes, very significant. Captain Kim leaned forward. Admiral, I need to ask you something directly. Why did you contact us? Your records show that humans were quarantined because we're considered dangerous. Taeho felt uncomfortable under her steady gaze. Because we're dying. We tried everything else. So you decided to call the monsters? Yes. Kim's polite mask slipped for just a moment. Taeho caught a glimpse of something predatory underneath. Then she smiled again and it was gone. How many would you need? She asked. I'm sorry? How many of our people would you need to solve your problem? The casual way she said it made Taeho's skin crawl, as if genocide was just a technical challenge. We're not asking you to fight for us, he said quickly, just to share any knowledge or technology that might help. Yuri started laughing. It was a disturbing sound. Oh, Admiral, you really don't understand, do you? Understand what? Jae-sung answered while still studying the tactical displays. You didn't call us for our technology. You called us because you need someone to solve a problem that can't be solved with normal methods. What do you mean? You need someone crazy enough to fight an enemy that always wins, Kim said. Someone who looks at impossible odds and gets excited instead of scared. She gestured to her companions. Jae-sung here has been planning a battle strategy since you showed us the first images. Yuri is already designing weapons that don't exist yet, and I'm thinking about how to turn this swarm's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. Taeho stared at them. You want to fight them? Want to? Yuri was still smiling. Admiral, humans have been fighting each other for 10,000 years just to stay in practice. We've never had a proper galaxy-threatening enemy before. This is exciting. You think war is exciting? Jae-sung looked up from the displays. Admiral, do you know what humans call a war that threatens our entire species? What? Tuesday, the room fell silent. Sojin was staring at the humans like they were some new and dangerous life form, which Taeho realized they were. I need detailed intelligence on the swarm, Kim said, her diplomatic manner returning. Everything you have. Biological analysis, movement patterns, communication methods, industrial capacity, all of it, of course. But Captain, you should know that many species have tried to fight the swarm. They all failed. That's because they tried to fight fair, Yuri said. Humans don't fight fair. We fight to win. As the data transfer began, Taeho watched Jae-sung sketch battle plans on a datapad. The human's enthusiasm was unsettling. He drew formations and attack vectors like an artist creating a masterpiece. How long until your fleet arrives? Taeho asked. Fleet's already moving, Kim said. We started mobilizing the moment we received your message. Earth takes threats to galactic stability seriously. How did you mobilize so quickly? You only got our message 3 days ago. Kim exchanged a look with her companions. Admiral, Earth has been watching galactic conflicts for decades. We've been ready for something like this. Watching? But the quarantine prevented contact, not observation. We know more about Confederation military capabilities than most Confederation officers do. The implication hit Taeho like a physical blow. Humans had been studying them for decades, learning their weaknesses, preparing. Don't worry, Admiral, Kim said as if reading his thoughts. We're not interested in conquest. We just like to be prepared. Prepared for what? For when someone needs the monsters to come save the day. The meeting ended an hour later with plans for the human fleet to rendezvous with Confederation forces in the Vega system. As they prepared to leave, Yuri paused at the door. Admiral, she said, you should know something. When we're done with the swarm, you might want to reinstate that quarantine. Why? Her smile was genuinely cheerful and absolutely terrifying. Because after this, you'll understand why the Council was so scared of us. After the humans left, Taeho sat alone in the conference room, staring at the tactical displays Jae-sung had been working on. The battle plans were brilliant, innovative, and completely insane. He realized he had made a terrible mistake. The Void Swarm might destroy the galaxy, but at least they were predictable. Humans were something else entirely. He had asked for monsters to save them. Now he was beginning to understand what that really meant. The human fleet arrived in the Vega system like a swarm of angry insects. Admiral Taeho counted the ships as they dropped out of hyperspace. 50, 100, 500. They kept coming until space around his small Confederation fleet was filled with human vessels. Sir, Dongwu said from his communication station, I'm reading over 800 ships. Taeho stared at the display. 800 ships. The humans had mobilized a fleet larger than the Confederation had ever assembled, and they had done it in less than a week. The human ships looked nothing like Confederation vessels. Where Confederation ships were smooth and elegant, human ships were angular and scarred. They bristled with weapons that Tae-ho couldn't identify. Many showed signs of battle damage that had been repaired rather than replaced. Incoming transmission from the flagship, Dongwu announced. The main screen filled with the image of a human man in his 50s. He wore a uniform covered in ribbons and medals. His hair was gray and his face was weathered like old stone. Admiral Tae-ho, the man said in a voice like grinding metal. I'm Fleet Admiral Yoon Min-ho, Supreme Commander of the Terran Expeditionary Force. Permission to come aboard for a strategy meeting. Of course, Admiral. We'd be honored. Good, I'm bringing my staff. We have work to do. The transmission ended. Tae-ho turned to Chief Science Officer So-jin. 800 ships. How did they build so many so quickly? Sir, I don't think they built them. I think they already had them. An hour later, Admiral Min-ho materialized in the Eternal Dawn's main conference room, along with 5 other humans. The teleportation technology was far beyond anything the Confederation possessed. Min-ho was an intimidating presence. He was tall and moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. The woman beside him, introduced as Young Da-hae, wore civilian clothes but had the cold eyes of a predator. The man on Min-ho's other side, Oh Kyung-soo, smiled constantly but somehow made everyone nervous. Let's get started, Min-ho said without preamble. He activated a holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red zones covered most of the map, showing swarm territory. This is your current situation. You have maybe 2 months before the swarm reaches the last inhabited systems. Yes, sir, Tae-ho said. We estimate your estimates are wrong. Min-ho highlighted several areas on the map. The swarm isn't moving randomly. They're following specific patterns. Resource-rich systems first, then population centers, then strategic positions. They're more intelligent than you think. So Jin leaned forward. You've been watching them? We've been watching everything, Da-hae said. Her voice was soft but somehow threatening. Humans are very good at observation. How long have you been watching? Tae-ho asked. Kyung-soo's smile widened. Since before the swarm arrived. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We knew about most of your military capabilities before you did. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Humans had been spying on the entire galaxy for decades. Don't look so worried, Admiral, Min-ho said. We're not interested in conquest. We have our own planet. We don't need yours. Then why have you been watching us? Because isolation makes you paranoid, Da-hae explained. We needed to know what was out here. What might threaten us someday. And now something has, Min-ho continued. This swarm of yours. They're expanding in our direction. Eventually they'll reach Earth, so you're fighting them to protect yourselves. Partly, but also because you asked for help. Min-ho manipulated the display, showing detailed tactical analyses of swarm movements. Humans don't ignore distress calls. Tae-ho studied the tactical data. It was more detailed than anything Confederation intelligence had produced. How did you learn so much about the swarm so quickly? We've been studying them since they first appeared, Kyung-soo said. The moment they entered the galaxy, we started watching. We've observed every battle, analyzed every defeat. We know exactly how they operate. And how do they operate? Da-hae answered. Like a perfect collective consciousness. Every unit connected to every other unit. Perfect coordination. Perfect information sharing. No individual initiative. That sounds like a strength, So-jin said. To most species, yes. To humans, it's a critical weakness. Da-hae's smile was disturbing. Perfect coordination requires perfect communication. Disrupt the communication and the entire system collapses. How do you disrupt something like that? By introducing concepts the collective mind can't process, Min-ho said. Chaos, deception, individual thought. Things humans excel at. The Admiral activated another display showing human fleet dispositions. Tae-ho noticed that the ships were arranged in patterns that seemed random, but somehow felt threatening. We're not going to fight the swarm the way you did, Min-ho explained. Direct combat, weapon against weapon. That's not how humans fight. How do humans fight? We fight dirty, Kyung-soo said cheerfully. We cheat, we lie. We use the enemy's strengths against them. Da-hae pulled up a new display showing psychological warfare techniques. The swarm operates on perfect logic and collective decision-making. We're going to introduce them to human concepts like paradox, contradiction, and madness. You're going to try to drive them insane? We're going to succeed at driving them insane, Minho corrected. Humans have been perfecting psychological warfare for thousands of years. We know how to break minds. Tejo felt a chill run down his spine. What if it doesn't work? Then we'll try something else. Humans are very adaptable. Minho gestured to his staff. Dahai specializes in breaking collective consciousness. Kyungsu handles strategic deception. My ship's AI can simulate 1 million battle scenarios per second. You have artificial intelligence? Several. We created them to help us fight better wars. Sojin spoke up. Admiral Minho, with respect, the swarm has destroyed civilizations that had technology far beyond what we've seen from Earth. True. But those civilizations tried to match the swarm's technology. We're not going to do that. Minho's expression became predatory. We're going to use technology they've never encountered. Technology specifically designed to exploit their weaknesses. What kind of technology? The kind that other species never developed because they were too civilized, Dahai said. Mind viruses, logic bombs, weapons that attack thought itself. Kyungsu activated a display showing human ship configurations. We've also developed some interesting variations on conventional warfare. Stealth systems that don't just hide ships, they make the enemy forget the ships exist. Weapons that fire possibility instead of energy. Possibility, quantum uncertainty made manifest. Very hard to defend against something that might or might not be there. The meeting continued for 3 hours. The humans outlined a battle plan that was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. They would attack the swarm's communication networks, introduce viral thoughts that would spread through the collective consciousness, and use weapons that violated several laws of physics. When do we begin? Tejo asked finally. We already have, Minho said. My scouts have been infiltrating swarm territory for the past 2 days. Phase 1 starts tomorrow. What's Phase 1? We teach the swarm to doubt themselves. After the humans left, Tejo remained in the conference room with Sojin and Dongwu. They sat in silence for several minutes. Sir, Dongwu said finally, I'm beginning to understand why they were quarantined. Because they're dangerous? Because they enjoy being dangerous. Did you see how excited they got when discussing psychological warfare? Sojin nodded. They treat war like an art form. Not something necessary, but something to be perfected. Tejo stared at the star map, now overlaid with human tactical plans. Red zones showing swarm territory, blue zones showing human objectives, and scattered throughout symbols he didn't recognize representing weapons he couldn't understand. We asked for monsters to save us, he said quietly. I just hope we can survive being saved. The war began with impossibility. Admiral Tejo watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn as human ships simply vanished from his sensors. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone, as if they had never existed. Sir, the human vessels just disappeared, Dongwu reported. All 800 of them. Where did they go? Unknown, sir. They were there one moment, gone the next. On the main screen, swarm forces moved through the outer system in their usual perfect formations. Geometric crystal ships arranged in patterns that spoke of absolute order and collective purpose. They had detected the Confederation fleet and were moving to attack. Then the swarm ships began firing at empty space. What are they shooting at? Chief Science Officer Sojin asked. I don't know, Tejo said. There's nothing there. But the swarm ships kept firing. Their formation began to break apart as individual units turned to engage targets that didn't exist. Within minutes, the perfect order had collapsed into chaos. Sir, incoming transmission from the human flagship, Dongwu announced. Admiral Minho's image appeared on screen. He was standing in what looked like a command center filled with displays showing impossible geometries. Phase 1 is proceeding successfully, he reported. The swarm is experiencing their first taste of uncertainty. What did you do to them? We introduced them to the concept of stealth that exists in quantum superposition. Our ships are simultaneously there and not there until observed. The swarm's collective mind can't process the contradiction. Tejo watched as swarm ships continued to fire at targets they couldn't see, couldn't verify, couldn't understand. How is that possible? Human physicist named Seo Jinwoo developed the theory. Said if uncertainty was good enough for the universe, it was good enough for warfare. On screen, a new impossible thing happened. A small human fighter craft materialized inside a swarm formation, fired a single shot that somehow hit 12 targets simultaneously. then vanished again. That's pilot Jinwoo himself, Minho said with something like pride. He volunteered to test the new phase shift technology. He's alone in there against hundreds of swarm ships. He's not alone. He's just in a different probability state. Hard to kill someone who might not be there. The battle continued in ways that hurt to think about. Human ships appeared and disappeared at random. Swarm vessels found themselves shooting at shadows while real attacks came from impossible angles. What had been a coordinated assault became a confused melee. "Sir," Sojin said, "I'm reading something strange from the swarm communication frequencies." "What kind of strange?" "It sounds like arguing. The collective consciousness is having a debate with itself." Minho's image smiled. "That would be Phase 2. Specialist Jung Da-hee is broadcasting contradictory logic into their network. She's very good at breaking minds." "What kind of contradictory logic?" "Paradoxes. This statement is false-type problems. The collective mind tries to resolve the contradiction and gets stuck in infinite loops." Taeho watched as more swarm ships began behaving erratically. Some stopped moving entirely. Others started moving in circles. A few even began firing on each other. Is that going to be enough to stop them? Oh no, Admiral. This is just the opening act. The main display shifted to show a different part of the battle. Human ships were doing something that looked like complex mathematics made manifest. Weapons fired beams of pure possibility that struck swarm vessels and made them uncertain about their own existence. "That's Han Bo-Ra's quantum warfare division," Minho explained. "She weaponized uncertainty itself. Very difficult to defend against an attack that might or might not be happening. This is insane. Yes, that's rather the point. The most disturbing part was how much the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Radio chatter picked up by Confederation sensors revealed pilots laughing as they performed impossible maneuvers. Engineers discussing new weapon modifications with enthusiasm. Marines requesting permission to board swarm ships just to see what would happen. "Sir," Dongwu said, "I'm receiving a transmission from Human Marine Commander Lim Sung-hwan. He's requesting permission to board a swarm hive ship." "That's suicide." "He says he's already aboard, sir. He wants to know if we'd like a tour." On screen, a new display showed the interior of a swarm vessel. Commander Sung-hwan stood in a corridor lined with crystal formations that pulsed with alien light. He was examining the walls with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating architecture," he reported. "Very organic. No individual spaces, everything connected. Perfect for what we're about to do." "What are you about to do?" Taeho asked. "Introduce them to the concept of privacy, individual thought. The idea that some things should be kept secret." Sung-hwan activated a device that looked like a small metal box. Immediately, the crystal formations around him began to flicker and dim. "Information isolation field," he explained, "creates zones of individual consciousness. The collective mind can't access thoughts inside the field." Through the ship's internal sensors, Taeho could see the effect spreading. Swarm creatures that entered the isolation zones began behaving differently. Some stopped moving. Others began exploring their environment with apparent curiosity. A few even seemed to be examining themselves. "You're making them individuals." "Temporarily. The effect will wear off. But for a few minutes they get to experience being alone with their thoughts. Most collective consciousness species find that terrifying." Indeed, the affected swarm creatures were displaying behavior that could only be described as panic. They rushed toward the boundaries of the isolation field, desperate to reconnect with the collective mind. "Commander, get out of there," Taeho ordered. "Already gone." "Sir," the display showed empty corridors. Sung-hwan had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. Moments later, the swarm ship exploded from the inside as its confused crew accidentally triggered their own weapons. "How did he escape?" "Human teleportation technology," Minho explained. "We developed it specifically for boarding actions. Very useful for introducing chaos into enemy command structures." The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, the swarm force that had entered the system was completely destroyed, not by overwhelming firepower, but by confusion, contradiction, and madness. "Casualty report?" Taeho asked. "Human losses 0, Dongwu reported. "Swarm losses total. How's that possible?" Minho's image reappeared. "Because we didn't fight them, Admiral. We taught them to fight themselves. Much more efficient. What happens now?" "Now we move to Phase 3. We've identified the location of the primary swarm nexus, the central node that coordinates their entire species. We're going to pay them a visit." "How do you know where it is?" "We ask them. Politely. You'd be surprised how talkative a collective consciousness becomes when you introduce uncertainty into its thought processes. Sojin looked up from her displays. Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from human ships. They're charging weapons I've never seen before. What kind of weapons? According to their technical specifications, they're called recursive logic bombs and paradox cannons. Sir, some of these weapon descriptions violate basic principles of physics. Minho's smile was becoming familiar and no less disturbing. Admiral, you called us because conventional methods had failed. We don't use conventional methods when what are you going to do? We're going to end this war the human way, quickly, efficiently, and with maximum psychological impact. The transmission ended. Around the Confederation fleet, space began to bend and twist as human ships activated drives that shouldn't exist. Reality itself seemed to recoil from the energies being unleashed. Sir? Dongwu said quietly. I'm starting to understand why the Council was so afraid of humans. Taeho nodded. He had asked for monsters to save them from the Void Swarm. Now he was beginning to realize that the cure might be worse than the disease. The humans weren't just winning the war. They were rewriting the rules of warfare itself. And they were enjoying every minute of it. The Void Swarm died screaming. Admiral Taeho watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn as the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known simply stopped. Across hundreds of star systems, swarm ships ceased their advance. Some powered down, others began moving in random patterns. Many turned their weapons on themselves. Sir, I'm reading massive disruption in swarm communication networks across the entire galaxy, Chief Science Officer Sojin reported. Their collective consciousness is fragmenting. The main display showed the swarm's central nexus, a massive crystalline structure the size of a moon. Human ships surrounded it, firing weapons that bent space and time. Each shot introduced new impossibilities into the swarm's perfect order. What are they doing to it? Taeho asked. Admiral Minho's image appeared on the communication screen. Behind him, impossible geometries shifted and flowed as his ship's reality-warping weapons fired continuously. We're teaching them to doubt, Minho said. Every shot carries a different paradox. What if up is down? What if cause follows effect? What if 2 + 2 = fish? The collective mind is trying to process thousands of contradictions simultaneously. And that's destroying them? Not destroying, liberating. For the first time in their existence, individual swarm units are thinking independent thoughts. They're discovering concepts like curiosity, fear, and confusion. Most of them can't handle it. On screen, the massive nexus began to change. Its perfect geometric surface started developing irregularities. Cracks appeared as the structure tried to accommodate thoughts it was never designed to process. Sir, Communications Officer Lee Dongwu announced, I'm receiving transmission from swarm ships. They're asking for help. Help with what? They say they can't stop thinking. Individual swarm units are requesting assistance in returning to the collective consciousness. Minho's expression became thoughtful. Fascinating. They're experiencing individuality as a form of torture. Very useful information for future conflicts. Future conflicts? Taeho felt a chill. You're planning to use this against other species? Only if they threaten Earth. Or our allies. Minho's smile was reassuring and terrifying in equal measure. Don't worry, Admiral. Humans are very selective about our enemies. The nexus suddenly flared with brilliant light, then began to collapse in on itself. Across the galaxy, swarm ships went silent one by one as their connection to the central mind was severed. It's over, Sojin whispered. Phase 4. Complete, Minho confirmed. The swarm collective consciousness has suffered complete cognitive collapse. Remaining units are operating on individual initiative only. What happens to them now? Some will adapt to individual thought. Others will shut down entirely. A few might even develop true consciousness. It's really quite beautiful in a way. Taeho stared at the display. In less than 2 weeks, humans had accomplished what the entire Galactic Confederation couldn't manage in 3 years. They hadn't just defeated the swarm. They had fundamentally changed what the swarm was. Admiral Minho, he said, the Confederation owes humanity a debt we can never repay. Actually, you can. We'll discuss terms once we've finished cleaning up. The transmission ended. Around the Confederation fleet, human ships began the systematic capture of disabled swarm vessels. They worked with the same cheerful efficiency they had shown throughout the war. 3 days later, the humans were ready to return home. The final meeting took place aboard the Eternal Dawn. Admiral Min-ho brought a different team this time. Baek Soo-jin, listed as a reconstruction coordinator. Kim Won-jae, described as a philosopher. And Park Hyun-ji, who would serve as liaison for ongoing Human Confederation relations. The swarm threat has been neutralized, Soo-jin reported. Approximately 60% of swarm units have shut down completely. 30% are operating on basic survival instincts. 10% are showing signs of developing individual consciousness. What about the damaged worlds? Taeho asked. Repairable. Swarm conversion isn't permanent. We can reverse most of the changes within a few years. Soo-jin paused. Of course, that assumes you want our help with reconstruction. Of course we do. Good, we've prepared a comprehensive rebuilding plan. Soo-jin activated a holographic display showing reconstruction timelines and resource requirements. We estimate full restoration of damaged systems within 5 standard years. Taeho studied the data. The scope of the project was staggering, but the humans had clearly thought it through in detail. What do you want in return? Diplomatic recognition, Park Hyun-ji said. An end to the quarantine. Normal relations between Earth and the Confederation. That's all? That's all? It seemed too simple. Taeho looked to philosopher Kim Won-jae. Is there something we should understand about humanity's intentions? Won-jae considered the question carefully. Admiral, other species fight to survive. Humans fight because it's what we are. We've been at war with something since we first picked up rocks and threw them at predators. But now you'll have peace. Peace is something we choose every day. War is our natural state. We have to actively decide not to fight. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a cold fog. Are you saying humans will always be a threat? We're saying humans will always be ready. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Today it was the Void Swarm. Tomorrow it might be something else. When that happens, you'll know where to find us. Park Hyun-ji activated another display. We're establishing new quarantine protocols. Not to contain Earth, but to protect other species from accidentally provoking us. Provoking you how? By being aggressive toward our allies, by threatening civilian populations, by developing weapons of mass destruction. She smiled pleasantly, by being unreasonable. Taeho realized he was seeing the terms of surrender disguised as a peace treaty. Humanity was establishing itself as the galaxy's ultimate authority on acceptable behavior. What if we refuse these terms? Won-jae answered. You won't. You've seen what we can do when we're helping. You don't want to see what we can do when we're not. Are you threatening us? We're offering friendship. But Admiral, you called us because you needed someone dangerous enough to stop the swarm. We stopped them. That doesn't make us less dangerous. The meeting ended with formal agreements that would reshape galactic politics. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power. Humans would assist with reconstruction efforts, and new protocols would be established for dealing with existential threats. As the humans prepared to leave, Soo-jin approached Taeho privately. Admiral, there's something you should know. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about every conflict, every war, every genocide that's happened in the past century. Why are you telling me this? Because we could have intervened at any time. We chose not to. We let you fight your own battles, make your own mistakes, solve your own problems. Until now. Until you asked for help. Humans don't interfere unless invited. She paused. But once invited, we tend to stay involved. After the humans departed, Taeho stood alone on his bridge, looking out at stars that were safe again. The red zones on the tactical display had turned blue, showing human patrol routes and reconstruction zones. The galaxy was saved. The Void Swarm was defeated. Peace had returned, but Taeho couldn't shake the feeling that they had simply traded one form of danger for another. The swarm had been alien and incomprehensible, but at least they had been predictable. Humans were something else entirely. They were helpful, friendly, and absolutely terrifying. They had saved the galaxy with weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that violated the laws of physics, and they had enjoyed every minute of it. Sir, Dongwoo said quietly, what do you think will happen now? Taeho thought about Won-jae's words. War was humanity's natural state. Peace was something they had to choose every day. I think, he said finally, that we need to be very careful never to give them a reason to stop choosing peace. On the long-range sensors, Earth's sun was just another star among billions. But Taeho knew that behind that ordinary light lay something extraordinary and terrifying. a species that had mastered war so completely they could afford to be peaceful. The galaxy was safe. The monsters had gone home, and that was exactly what made them so dangerous.